and dear participants. I would really like so much to give the floor to our colleague and friend from the Faculty of Social Sciences of the University of Ljubljana, Associate Professor Dr. Marjan Cugmas, who will have a presentation on the topic of generalized block modeling. So Marjan, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation to participate at this summer school. I will talk about generalized block modeling in a very non-mathematical way. I also prepared many examples so that at the end of this talk, you will know in which situations and for which research questions you can answer by using a block modeling, specifically generalized block modeling. Now, this course is usually held by me and Aleš Žiberna. Aleš Žiberna was my mentor, one of mentors. The second one was Anuška Ferligoj. Aleš Žiberna is also the author of the block modeling R package. I will demonstrate at the end of this session, if we will have time, how to use this block modeling package. If we will not have time, then I will show you where you can find the code that I prepare, especially for you, with a lot of comments so that you will be able to go by yourself through the code. So Aleš Žiberna is mainly working in this multivariate analysis and block modeling, computer-intensive methods, and so on. While me, on the other hand, I'm studying, for example, social support networks. 2 years ago, I think, me and Nusha made a survey among the elderly people where we were interested in the social support types they have during the COVID pandemic. If you visit my webpage, outlier.si, you will find a very appealing and interesting video that we created together with Nusha. Now, for around 10 years, I am also collaborating with National Institute of Public Health, where I'm dealing with online counseling services, for young people. And for my PhD dissertation, and this is still a quite large part of my work, I was studying how specific local network mechanisms, without considering any characteristics of the nodes, affect the change or the emergence of a global network structure, where the global network structure was defined by different types of block models. Some of you might not know what is a block model yet, but you will find later. And then I also I'm researching scientific collaboration, all sorts of scientific collaboration. Currently, I'm involved in a project in which we are studying co-mentorship of doctoral students, and we see this mentorship as a form of scientific collaboration. But in the previous years, I was also studying what is a typical global network structure of a scientific collaboration among Slovene researchers. I will show you a tiny part of this study a little bit later as well. So if you are interested in what I'm doing, you can visit my outlier.si webpage, and there you can browse this webpage. Now it's time for advertisement. This title is obviously a joke, but you will find 4 very core, so 2 books and 2 papers, core materials for today's topic. The first is Generalized Block Modeling. This is, you cannot see probably, yeah. This is this book written by Patrick Dorian, Vladimir Batagel, and Anuška Ferligoj. And most of things that I'm going to talk about today can be found in this book. It's a little bit mathematical, but all the formulas are very nicely described with words in plain language. So it shouldn't be a problem even for the beginners. And then we have these advances in network clusterings and block modeling. This is this book. It's a little bit newer book. I listed this one because it covers very wide topics, not only generalized block modeling, but also stochastic block modeling and so on. Then you have a chapter about bibliometric analysis for the network clustering. I don't know. There are some extensions also of block modeling. For example, Karel Nordlund and Aleš Žiberna wrote a chapter on block modeling of valued networks. And if you will go and if you are going to apply these block modeling procedures, and if you have some missing data, then you will find the treating missing network data before partitioning section extremely useful. And there are other, I won't go through the whole book, but I just want to persuade you that this book is really worth considering. Then you have block modeling on error package for generalized block modeling. This is the paper that it wrote Miha Matjašić, me, and Aleš Žiberna. It's some kind of a tutorial for using block modeling package with some examples. It was published in Metodološki zvezki. You will find it online or on my webpage. And then there is a generalized block modeling with PAEC. Paper if you're going to use PAEC for block modeling. So what is block modeling? Now, block modeling is a group of methods for clustering units and ties in a network. So we can analyze all sorts of networks in which the units can be, or nodes can be institutions or individuals, cities, whatever. And also the links can be whatever, friendships, communications, and so on. So it's a group of methods for clustering units. And by the definition of Dorian and his colleagues, it is used to reduce large potentially incoherent network structures to smaller comprehensible networks that are easier to interpret. And the result of block modeling, as a result, we get the clusters of equivalent units in the network. I will tell you about equivalency a little bit later. I will define this term more specifically. And the second type of results is that are the ties within and between this cluster. And once we shrink or reduce this large network, we get a smaller network, which is called a block model. So a block model is a network where the nodes are now clusters. They're often called also positions of equivalent nodes from the study network. Here is an example of one network. It's just a toy network. You can see these nodes are like individuals, and there are the links between them. But what can you notice is that those blue-colored nodes have very similar structure of links. They are not linked to each other, but they are all linked to these red-colored nodes. And because they have this similar structure of links, we can say that these blue-colored nodes are equivalent. And the same goes for these red-colored nodes, which are also linked to each other. So these red-colored nodes are linked to each other, while these blue-colored nodes are not linked to each other. Because these blue-colored nodes has very similar structure of links, we say that they are equivalent. They can be shrinked into one node, and this is visualized here. And the same is for these red-colored nodes. So we obtain two new nodes, and these nodes are now actually clusters of nodes from the original network. And what we can also see are the links between these two nodes, meaning groups of nodes. One link is linking the red and blue nodes, which means that these two groups of nodes are linked to each other. And then we have a loop here, which visualizes the fact that also those units within the red group are very tightly connected. I will also mention the term block many times today. And the term block refers to a submatrix that shows the links between two clusters or within one cluster. So this is another example. Now I have a different network, which is visualized not in it's visualized also in a matrix form and in a graph form here. Now we don't have a binary network. We have a weighted network with some values assigned to the links. In rows, we have units, and in columns, we have also units. And then we have these links here, which are represented by these entries in the matrix. So this is original network in a matrix form. This is original network in a graph form. And once we apply a block modeling procedure, we obtained a partition. And based on this partition, we can reorder the nodes so that those that are in the same cluster are placed next to each other. And those nodes from different clusters are separated. So different clusters are separated with these blue lines. Now you can see that the value, and this is these submatrices that are separated with these blue nodes are called blocks. And you can see that the values within each blocks are now quite homogeneous. And this is the result of so this is a network, actually, original network where the nodes are colored according to the solution of a block modeling. So the obtained partitions. So this is blue, the first, green, the second, and red, the third cluster. And then we have block model here. I said that the block model is a network where the nodes visualize different clusters. So we have only 3 nodes here because we have 3 clusters. And here we have an image graph or image matrix, which represents also different clusters, and the block densities are in the entries of this matrix. So here you can see that we have kind of some kind of a core periphery structure. We have one core. This is this green node, and we have 2 cohesive groups which are internally very well linked to each other and also with the core. So there are several typical ways in which the block modeling can be used. I will show you 3 examples. Now the common ground is that we will assume that we collected some data on scientific collaboration among student researchers, and there are 3 different ways how to use the block modeling. First, to find clusters of units that have equivalent, in some sense, ties to the other units. Here we apply block modeling to identify researchers with similar pattern of scientific collaboration and to reveal the global network structure of scientific collaboration. And when we use block modeling in such a way, we do not put any assumptions on the global network structure. And this is a very explorative way to use block modeling. The second possible use of block modeling is to find clusters of units according to some pre-specified structure of a network. For example, let us say that we know the global network structure is core periphery, then we can apply block modeling to identify which researchers belong to the core and which researchers belong to the periphery. And the last, more confirmatory way of using a block modeling is to evaluate the fit of a given partition to a network and a pre-specified structure. For example, we assume that the global network structure is core periphery. Then we apply block modeling to evaluate the fit of the empirical network to the core periphery structure. Another possible use would be that we would be the case in which we have a partition determined, for example, by scientific field affiliation, and we would want to evaluate how this partition is consistent with a cohesive network structure. So essentially, we would test whether the scientific field generates a cohesive global network structure. I mentioned this equivalence several times already, and now it's time to say a few words about what equivalency or equivalence is. There are actually several definitions, but in the framework of block modeling, we say that 2 units are clustered into the same clusters if they are equivalent. Now, the most well-known equivalencies are structural equivalency. We say that two units are structural equivalent if they are related in the same way to each other and to all other units. If we would have a network and if we would remove the labels from the nodes, then if two units would be structurally equivalent, we would not be able to identify these two units, to distinguish between these two units. Now the corresponding ideal block types are null and complete blocks. In complete blocks, we ideally have all possible links, while in null blocks, we have no links. I will say a few words later about these types of blocks. And this structure equivalency is, to my knowledge, the most often used equivalence in practice. Now then, this regular equivalency is also very famous. It is defined, it says that regular equivalent units are connected in the same way with the clusters of equivalent units. This definition is very close to sociological definition of a social rule. However, it is rarely present in empirical data, and as shown by Anja Žnidaršič, who is also studying this problem of missing data and stability of partitions and so on, this regular equivalence is quite sensitive to small changes, to small network changes, meaning to small changes in the links. Now the corresponding ideal blocks have at least one tie in each row and column. These are called regular blocks, or are completely empty. So regular equivalency is a special case of structural equivalency. So if a structural equivalency holds, then also regular equivalency holds. Then we have structural equivalency. Two units are stochastic equivalency. Now two units are stochastically equivalent if they have the same probabilities of ties to all the other units. I will not talk about stochastic equivalency today. And then we have generalized equivalency, which is defined by the set of allowed block types and possibly their position. As I will show you in a few seconds, this generalized block modeling is very handy because you can just specify different block types among many possible defined block types. This is then indirectly defining the a criterion function. So these are just some, there are many approaches to block modeling, but we could categorize them in deterministic block modeling approaches and stochastic block modeling approaches. I will not talk about stochastic block modeling approaches today. But within deterministic block modeling approaches, we have a conventional block modeling, also known as direct block modeling, and generalized block modeling. Now, the procedure for conventional block modeling is to calculate the dissimilarity matrix on for example, a network matrix, but we could also use some other statistics that describe the units, and then we use one of the standard clustering algorithm on this matrix, such as Ward or some other approaches, k-means maybe. The minuses of this approach are that you have to define and calculate the compatible dissimilarity measure. This is corrected Euclidean distance for structure equivalency, but sometimes it can happen that for some equivalence types, this compatible dissimilarity measure does not exist. I think that the regular equivalency is one of such cases. And there is no explicit measure of fit of the fit of network to the model. So we have a generalized block modeling also. Now this is the direct approach. Direct meaning, so if a direct approach, which means that an explicit Criterion function is optimized. And here we do not calculate any dissimilarity matrix. So the whole procedure is done on the network data level. And the solution is found by randomly relocating the nodes among the cluster in such a way that the value of a Criterion function is minimized. I will say a few words about Criterion function on the next slide. And it is based on a generalized equivalency. This means that the equivalency is defined based on the allowed block types. There are several types of generalized block modeling, such as binary block modeling, and then valued, implicit, and homogeneity block modeling. And the last three can be applied also on valued networks. Criterion function, as I mentioned, reflects the difference between an ideal network structure and the empirical network structure. Now, the basic procedure for the computation of a Criterion function is the following. First, you split the network matrix into blocks. Then you calculate the error. Error is sometimes also referred to as an inconsistency. So you calculate this for all allowed block types in each block. And then for each block, you select the block type with the minimum error and then calculate the total error as the sum of all block types. Here is an example. Let us say that we have an empirical network and we split this empirical network into 4 blocks, meaning 2 clusters. So the first cluster, second cluster, first cluster, second cluster, and then the first block, second, third, and fourth block. So we have four submatrices showing the links within the clusters and between the clusters. Now we calculate the number of inconsistencies or errors for the first block if we assume the null block. So if we have a null block, this means that we allow ideally only non-links. So each link here is 1 inconsistency, 1 error. So we basically count links. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we would have 7 errors if this would be declared as a null block. And if it would be complete, then we want to have all possible links, and all non-links are errors. So we are basically counting non-links. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This would be 9. And because the error is lower if we assume null block, we say that this is a null block. And the same procedure is done for all other blocks. And this is the resulting image matrix. So we have a block model with 2 groups, 2 nodes, and this visualizes the links between the nodes. So we don't have links in the first group and within the second group, but the first group is linked to the second one, and the second group is linked to the first group. So this is the description of a global network structure in terms of a block model type. And then the total error is calculated as a sum of these errors, which is 18. So 7 plus 6 plus 5 plus 0. So this is a general idea on how we calculate the value of a Criterion function if we have a binary network. And just keep in mind that we want to have this value as low as possible. So a lower values indicates a better fit. So let me continue with this binary block modeling. When this is used, values of ties are not considered, only the presence and absence of ties are considered. I also explained this, I just explained this. And here are some common ideal block types shown, but know that many other exist. You can find them in this book, Generalized Blockmodeling, or this paper written by Aleš and me and Micha. But I don't have like time and space, so I decided to include only the most common blocks. So I already explained these null blocks. Yeah, ideally, there is no link in null blocks, and in complete, ideally, we have all possible links. So all values are 0. And then we have these regular blocks. In regular, ideally, we have at least one. So at least one link in each row and at least one link in each column. And then we have special cases of these regular blocks, which are row regular and column regular. In row regular, we have at least one link in each row. And in column regular, we have at least one link in each column. Here is a mistake. Now, this is one example. I already mentioned that I was studying whether specific local network mechanisms can produce global network structures, a very clear global network structure, and which global network structure if we do not consider any characteristics of the nodes. In one part of the research, I consider the following local network mechanisms, namely popularity, transitivity, associativity, and mutuality. And I developed an algorithm for generating networks by considering these local network mechanisms. And then the question was how to identify whether there is a clear global network structure in this network. What I did was, of course, to apply block modeling. Because I had a binary network, so I applied binary block modeling. So this is, I also assume structure equivalency, and this is just one generated network. I also got like more clear structures, but this would not be so interested. So as an example, I pick the one that is has some inconsistencies as well. So you can see this is I got three groups. I have one popular group. You can see that these units 1, 9, 10, 12, and 20 they are linked by all other units in the network, but even within the group, they are quite well linked to each other. And then I got 2 additional cohesive groups. They are linked to each other quite well. And they are also linked to this popular group. What I also calculated is this image matrix here. In the entries of this image matrix are the densities multiplied by 10. So block densities. So here the densities are 10 because we have all possible links, no inconsistencies. And then we have a visualization in a graph form of this network. So valued block modeling, values of ties are considered with a specified threshold value M over which the ties are considered relevant. The inconsistencies are measured as deviations from 0 or M, and deviation from M is computed only if the tie value is lower than M. Now the main problem here is how to determine this M, and it is very helpful if you have some substantial knowledge about the network. If you don't have, then you might want to take a look at the distribution of the tie values and to determine this M based on these tie values. Binary block modeling is a special case of valued block modeling. In this case, the M would be 1. Also, here we have null and complete blocks. In null blocks, there is no links. All values are equal to 0. In complete, all values are at least M. So if you assume that M is 4, then you can see that all values here are larger than 4. Then we have max regular. Then we have many other possible block types, which are not listed here, but some are, for example, max regular block or a sum regular block. Here, instead of looking at the cell values, we are looking at the function over each row or column or both. In the case of max regular, this function is maximum value. So when we have max regular block, the maximum over each row and column must be at least m. And in some regular, the sum must be at least m. And then we have this row dominant and column dominant blocks. Here, all values, there is at least one row or one column in which all values are at least m. Here is one example. This example is based on the police academy data collected from police recruits during a police training regime. The network data were obtained by a survey in which recruits were asked to estimate the level of social knowledge of other recruits on a 5-point Likert scale from acquainted with them but did not know them well to 5 know them extremely well. Now we have some substantial knowledge about this link. We know that 3 is quite a strong social knowledge, and we consider only strong social knowledge to be relevant. So we said that we set a threshold value m to 3, and then we apply the valued block modeling with structure equivalency, and this is the empirical network drawn in line with the block modeling solution. This is an image matrix. Yeah, you can see that we got one very popular group of recruits. Everyone knows them. And then we have additional cohesive groups. This last group is of course, this popular group, but also this last cohesive group is known. So this popular group also know this last cohesive. So these are very tightly connected. But the difference between this last group and the first one is that the last group is not that does not know these other groups and this popular group. Okay. It might sound confusing, but I will continue with the second example with homogeneity block modeling. A general idea here is to minimize a measure of variability within blocks for a relevant quantity. And if we consider structural equivalence, then this quantity are cell values. But if we consider regular equivalency, we can use a different function f, which is then apply over rows or columns. And there are other block types which I will not discuss today. And this variability can be measured in different ways. The two measures are very common. The first is sum of square deviation from the mean, and the second one is the sum of absolute deviations from the median. Now in this homogeneity block modeling is very nice because you don't have to specify this m value. So we have this many different types of blocks. Again, in null blocks there is ideally no links, but in complete blocks we would have all values of the same, all type values of the same value. So variability would be 0. So we have all 5. And in the case of max regular or mean regular, the maximum or mean value over all rows and columns would be equal. And in the case of row dominant or column dominant blocks, the row or columns would exist in which all values would be equal, for example, as 5 here and 9 here. This is one example. Here the units are organizations, and the links visualize the communications following the flash flooding in 3 countries. counties. And the upper part here visualizes the results of homogeneity block modeling. We obtained the blocks with similar cells values, so we have similar shades here. I didn't put the numbers because you would not be able to read them. So these type values are visualized with different shades, and you can see that the shades within blocks are quite similar. With this homogeneity block modeling, we do not get the information on which block is null and which is complete and so on. But we usually determine this based on the block densities. So blocks with relatively low mean values or densities are typically interpreted as null blocks. And the lower part here, the term displays the partitions determined by counties. You can see that there are some differences, and how similar the two partitions are can be calculated by using the adjusted trend index. This index can take the values up to 1, and if we have two random and independent partitions, so when the partitions are very different, extremely different, then the expected value would be 0. So you can see that the value of a random index is around 0.4, which means that with homogeneity block modeling, we got quite different result as we would get if the partitions would be determined with these counties. So these counties does not determine the communication patterns among the different organizations, which is probably good because there is a good communication flow between the organizations, even though if they are from different counties. So these are the main different types of block modeling. Now I will talk about special topics. The first is free and specified models. Sometimes you use block modeling to explore the data. So to run an exploratory analysis. In this case, you would use some so-called non-specified model, or sometimes called also free model. Here, you will specify only the number of clusters and allowed block types and nothing else. And then you will observe the structure. This is what I was mainly showing on these examples until now. If you would have some prior knowledge about the global network structure, then you would probably apply the pre-specified block modeling or specified block modeling. Here you will specify the number of clusters, allowed block types, and also the relationships between the clusters. So, so you will specify the whole image metric. And then the algorithm will assign the units to the clusters. Here is a fun fact, which is saying that free models typically result in the same or even lower value of a criterion function compared to the pre-specified model. So we always want a lower value of a criterion function because this means a better fit. And this fun fact is then logical. If we put some constraints on the model, we can get if we do not put constraints on the model, we can get a better model fit. Here is the list of very common block model types according to Dorian and his colleagues. I already mentioned cohesive block model type several times. Here, ideally, we have several groups of units that are internally very well linked to each other, but those from different units from different clusters are not linked to each other at all. Then we have this symmetric core periphery and asymmetric core periphery. typically here we have one group of nodes or units that are very well linked to each other, and they are also linked to everyone else in the network, and everyone else in the networks are linked to these core units. Now, know that many other definitions of core periphery exist. I put some references here if you are interested in this. Some of them assume that those units in the periphery are not linked to the core and so on. So there are many different possible definitions. Then we have hierarchical transitivity. In these cases, we can order the groups of units in a hierarchical way. When those in the lower level are linked to those in the upper level. And sometimes the units in the upper, the units on the same level are linked to each other, or sometimes they are not. The difference between transitivity and hierarchical models, block model types, is that in transitivity block model types, the units in the lower levels are linked to all the units from all upper levels, while those in hierarchical models, here only the units from one level below are linked to the upper level, but not to all the upper levels. Now know that these are very typical ideal cases, and in real life you will rarely see such cases, maybe cohesive, core periphery, but more often you will find a combination of different common block model types. So if we want to use this pre-specified or specified model, and if we assume core periphery model, we can specify such image matrix in which we have core and the periphery. I said that the core units must be linked to each other. So we said that the first cell, the first block is complete. And the peripheral units must be unlinked, not linked to each other. So the last diagonal block have to be set to null. And then depends on different definitions on core periphery structure. These off-diagonal blocks can be set to either null, complete, or regular. And we apply this. I will show you later how to apply this in block modeling package. Here is another example, real example about scientific collaboration. We studied the stability of co-authorship networks among Slovene researchers by 72 scientific disciplines, and to identify groups of researchers that collaborate with each other in a consistent manner. We use, of course, what else but block modeling. Now, Anushka Ferligo and Luca Kroneger did many studies, previous studies on 4 scientific disciplines mainly, I think. And they have shown, also based on theoretical grounds, that the common global network structure is so-called multicore semi-periphery periphery. Let me explain this briefly. In the multicore part, we have clusters of researchers from a scientific discipline who publish at least one bibliographic unit together. So these are very tightly cohesive groups of research, tightly connected cohesive groups of researchers. But researchers from different clusters might also collaborate. So these cohesive groups can be linked to each other. Then we have semi-periphery. These denote the researchers who co-author in a less systematic way. And then we have a periphery, which denotes researchers who publish just as a single author or with authors outside the network boundary. So this is a group of researchers without any links to the others. So we defined our image matrix as following. On the diagonal, we demanded complete blocks. So this is these multicores. Off diagonal, we say, okay, we can have either null block or complete block. If we have complete block, this means that we have so-called bridging core, because a given core would link to different cores. And then in the last row, in this, not the last, but I don't know how to say this. Not the last one, but one before the last one. We said this to be a null or complete. This is for so-called the periphery, which can be very dense or very sparse. And then the last row and the last column, all the blocks here were set to null because this is the periphery. We do not allow any links to be present here. Here is one result for sociology field for the first time period between 1991 and 2000. We got similar results for all other developed scientific disciplines, and you can see there is no links in the periphery. All null blocks are present here. We have a very sparse blocks here, and then on the diagonal we have very dense blocks. So these are the groups of researchers that collaborate in a very tight manner. But of the diagonal, we can see a lot of null blocks, not many links here. But here we have one complete block here, which is linked to clusters, and these are called then bridging core. Now, when using block modeling, you have to somehow select the number of clusters before applying block modeling procedure. This is still an open problem. However, there are some possibilities. One is to use substantial knowledge that you have about the network. Then you can apply direct block modeling and look at the dendrogram. And you can compare criterion function values across different number of clusters, or you can compare the relative fit measure values across different number of clusters. I will show some examples. Based on the data collected in the kindergarten. We got the data were collected in a class with 18 pupils, and the link between two pupils exists if they were observed to interact. So we have interactional networks, and it's logical that the interactions are symmetric. We assume this symmetric core cohesive block model type. If you are interested in more, you can check out this reference. So the first option is to calculate the corrected Euclidean distance, which is in line with the structural equivalence, and on this on the network matrix, and then apply Ward hierarchical clustering approach. And based on the resulting dendrogram, you can then select the number of clusters. So I would say here 2 or even 3 clusters would be interesting to look at. Once you determine the number of clusters, you can keep this as a final solution, or you can apply indirect block modeling with this number of clusters. But note that in this case, it is good if the this distance is in line. Distance use is in line with the selected equivalency. The second way is to observe the criterion function values. We apply generalized block modeling, assuming structural equivalency here. For different number of clusters, I went for 1 to 6. I don't want to have more than 6 clusters. And just for fun, I used free and pre-specified model. Here, we cannot use the specified model. This is only free model here possible. But in the here with the generalized block modeling, we can use specified model. Now, in the case of free models, you will see that the value of a criterion function will only decrease or stabilize at a given number of with a number of clusters. While this pre-specified model, you might observe a number of clusters after which until which the value will decrease, and after which the value will stabilize or even start increasing again. So with this pre-specified model, you are interested in taking a look at elbow or at the minimum value, while for this free model, you want to observe at which number of clusters you can observe the elbow or a break in a scree plot. So for a pre-specified model, I would say 3 or 4 clusters, maybe 3, because the number, because the difference between, because the difference in the number, in the value of a criterion function between 3 and 4 clusters is not that large, but the solution with 3 clusters might be much more parsimonious. And for the free model, I would say 4 clusters, because until 4 clusters, the values of criterion functions are dropping quite fast, but then they stabilize at least a bit. Another approach is to use the relative fit measure. This is defined as 1 minus. So here is the formula: 1 minus the ratio between a criterion function that is obtained on the empirical network, so your network, and the expected value of a criterion function that is calculated on many randomly generating networks. So you have to calculate many values of a criterion function, meaning that you have to apply block modeling procedure many times, which means that this is quite computationally intensive approach. However, higher values indicates a better fit, and in general, it is defined between, in the case of random networks, expected value would be 0, and in the case of perfect fit, the value would be 1. When generating these random networks, you might want to consider some constraints on the links. For example, constraints on the out degree or in degree, or you have to consider whether there are some physical constraints in the links between the units and so on. What is advantage of this relative fit measure is that the fit of different block model types and different number of clusters are comparable. And also the values obtained on different networks are comparable. For example, the networks of different size or different densities and so on. This is the main and the most important advantage. However, if you have some prior knowledge on the network structure, this can improve the results and reduce the computational costs, because you can limit the number of clusters for which you want to calculate the relative fit and also the possible block model types. Here are the results. As I said, it is defined between roughly 0 and 1. Higher values indicates a better fit. You can see that based for a pre-specified value, the higher value is around 3 clusters. So I would select 3 clusters for pre-specified model and 4 clusters for the free model. And here are the results from different number of clusters. So I would select 2 clusters based on this first approach, 2 or 3, but it seems that this is not enough because we might have some structure also here. If I select 3 clusters, I get this structure, which was the expected structure. Now these 2 solutions, mainly pre-specified and free, are identical. No difference here. But if I increase the number of clusters to 4, I can reveal some more structure in this network. However, the fit is better when we have so the value of criterion function is lower when we have a free model, and this is logical and expected. Again, we have one core unit and one popular group of pupils and 2 other groups that are interacting with everyone, but they do not. Those from different 2 groups do not interact with each other. This can be seen from the fact that we have these null blocks here, so there is no links from the third group to the second one. Sparse networks are very common in social network analysis, but there is a problem with sparse network, and this is that if we use structure equivalency, we usually get only very small complete blocks and one very large null block. And if we use regular equivalency, almost all units are classified into the same equivalence class. So Ljubljana proposed 2 general suggestions. The first is to apply binary block modeling with structural equivalence, considering different weights for error. So the errors or inconsistencies are weighted differently in null and complete blocks. And the second proposal was to apply homogeneity sum of squares block modeling with null and constraints complete blocks to P. And consequently, when dealing with null and complete blocks, the mean values of these blocks would be either 0 in null blocks or at least P in complete blocks. Here we have one example. So I have very high number of different examples. We will analyze the data about knowledge flow now within Slovenian knowledge flow-based company, knowledge-based company. So the nodes here are the employees, and the arrows point towards the source from which a given employee is learning. So this is a binary network. The respondents has to list all the networks from which they are learning. And you can see that it is relatively sparse. So this is a network in a matrix form. Again, you can see it's very sparse. We apply structure equivalence here, and you can see that we end up with several with 3 very small clusters and 1 very large cluster. And in this, we have here 2 or 3, 1, 2, 3 very dense blocks, but other blocks are very sparse, especially this very large null block, where we can see some additional structure here and also here. So you can clearly see that this solution is not optimal. If we apply regular equivalency, we get a similar result in the sense that we can see some kind of a core periphery structure. Maybe 2 clusters would be more appropriate for this approach. But still, we see quite a lot of unexplained links here. So even structure equivalency is not optimal. Regular equivalency is not optimal here. So we used sparse binary block modeling. here we set different weights for null blocks and complete blocks. The weights for null blocks were set to 1, and the weights for complete blocks were set proportional to the overall network density. And you can see that the densities across null and complete blocks are now much more homogeneous. We got a very interesting structure. It's kind of two core periphery structures here. Usually, when you apply block modeling and get your results, what you want to do next is to explain the obtained clusters. And here I attempt to do this. So for each cluster, I calculated the cluster size, obviously, the mean tenure in years. So cluster 1, 2, 3, 4, and also the distribution of different departments in each cluster by clusters. So we have, so this is a relatively large company. No, it's small, but have several departments. So banking solution, common services, directorate, industry solutions, and vision. And what I also did was to visualize this network. So the node size visualized the size of clusters. And then we have these block densities visualized with these arrows. And I didn't plot the arrows with very low density, so that I a little bit simplified the structure. So you can see one core periphery structure, another core periphery structure. And if we take a look at this cores 2 and 4, you can say that cluster 1 is learning from cluster 2, cluster 3 is learning from cluster 4, and you can see that cluster 2 and cluster 2 is older than cluster 1 in the sense of tenure, and cluster 3 is also older than cluster 4. Which is unexpected. I might make a mistake here, but usually the older ones are learning from the, the youngest are learning from the older ones. And what we can also see is that this structure is very determined with the department. For example, if we focus on the clusters 3 and 4, we can see that they consist only of the Navision department. And then if we focus on cluster 1 and 2, you can see that the whole directorate is in cluster 2. And then we have different other departments in cluster 1 and also in cluster 2 as well. So this is how I try to explain this global network structure that is the consequence of some nodes characteristics. But we have different types of valued networks. They depends on how we measure the time values. There are two main possible approaches to measure, or two types of measuring time values. The first is subjective judgment, which is based on some kind of rating scale, such as Likert scale. This is very subjective, and it is based on the perception of the responding actor. So if the Likert scale would be how well I know someone, from I don't know him at well to I know him very well, this very well can be perceived differently by me or by Anushka Ferligoy or anyone else. So it's quite subjective. However, the extremes, the maximum and minimum values are the same for all the units and are clearly defined. One example is attraction towards someone rated on a 5-point Likert scale. Then another approach or type of valued networks is determined with when we used direct measurements of what we measure, flows, frequencies, intensities of interactions. The measurements itself are more objective, but the perception of what is strong tie varies among the actors. It is unbounded, meaning that there is no defined pre-specified minimum, maximum, sometimes also minimum. However, some natural limits might exist. Example is the trade among European Union countries. Now, block modeling becomes particularly challenging when the units possess these so-called varying relational capacities, as this is the case in the second example. So larger countries has larger high relational capacities, and smaller countries have some, for example, smaller, lower relational capacities. Here is a general recommendation for such cases. So first you have to ask yourself whether you have equal relational capacities, whether the units have equal relational capacities. If the answer is yes, then you can use these approaches that are focusing on tie strengths, so homogeneity or valued block modeling, as I showed you. If the answer is no, then you have to ask yourself whether they should influence the results or no. If the answer is yes, these unequal relational capacities should influence the result, then you can use this approach, standard homogeneity or valued block modeling approaches. But if these varying relational capacities should not influence the results, then you should use correlation or deviational based approaches, or even better, you should apply some transformations and then use this homogeneity or valued block modeling approach. Here is a more complete diagram for taking a decision on which is the most appropriate block modeling procedure. This was proposed by Karel Nordlund and Aleš Iberna, I think. You can take a screenshot if you want, or look at this. Is also in this book, Advances in Networks in Clustering and Block Modeling. So I mentioned here these transformations or normalizations. I will say a few words about this now. So when these different relational capacities should not affect the results, when the size of a country should not affect the final block modeling solution, for example, you should apply some kind of transformation or normalization. There are several types of such normalizations. I just mentioned 2 or 3 of them. The first is the iterative marginal row column normalization. This is a process in which the row and column vectors of a matrix are adjusted iteratively so that their sum equal to 1. This normalization allows the values in the matrix to be interpreted as equivalent to raw values in a hypothetical scenario where all the units possesses the same relational capacities. And the second approaches are the transaction flow and deviational transformation approach. These are conceptually very similar, and both are based on comparable empirical values with the values under the null model. The null model is the model in which the nodes are independent. I will not go into the details here. Instead, I will continue with this example. Here we have commodity trade among 30 European Union countries in 2010, measured in millions of dollars. You can see that the values goes from 1 to 100,000. The mean values is 3, standard deviation is 10. 10,000. And the mean value is 400, which indicates a very skewed distribution, which can be also seen here on this histogram. You can see that there is no theoretical maximum value for the commodity trade. Additionally, the among countries' relational capacities are unequal. So larger countries have greater capacities. And also there is no specific threshold to determine when a tie can be considered prominent in this trace scenario, so that you could use this valued block modeling. So here are some examples on how we can analyze such data. We can start with this original data and apply homogeneity block modeling. And in this case, we would obtain 1, 2, 3, 4 clusters. In cluster 1, we will find Germany as dominant country with very strong ties with all other countries. And then we would find our core countries. These are here, France, Netherlands, Great Britain, Italy, Belgium. They are very well linked to each other, and also with Germany, and also with this third cluster of semi-peripheral countries. These are more weakly connected to each other, but they are quite connected with these core countries. And then we have these peripheral countries in which we find all other countries. Now, the logical continuation would be to log transform data, because we have quite skewed distribution here. And if we log transform data, the distribution is less skewed, but the result is very similar as before. But the Germany is now with this core cluster of countries. It's not separate cluster anymore, but otherwise very similar result. But to encounter these unequal relational capacities, we can use these marginal row column normalizations and then apply this homogeneity block modeling. And then we can see 6 clusters. And the global network structure is very different now. And you can see that these clusters are much determined with the geographical region. As it is written here, we have Central Eastern European countries, Central Western European countries, Northern Europe, Baltic countries, and so on. So we have shown that the existence of several block modeling approaches and various data transformation methods exists, and this can lead to a very high number of potential approaches for analyzing your data. However, the crucial questions to answer prior to the analysis of such networks are: do units have the same relational capacities, and does having different relational capacities matter? But you can still apply different block modeling procedure, and this will enable you to take a look at the data from different viewpoints. But if you understand how these transformations and different approaches to block modeling works, you will be able to interpret these different viewpoints. Here is the conclusion, and then I will show you some how to do this in R. So block modeling is a technique for identifying clusters in the networks, and you can also determine the ties within and between these obtained clusters. There are several approaches available. Conventional, generalized, stochastic became very popular in the recent years. And then this can be used either on binary or valued networks. And generalized block modeling is very nice because it offers quite a lot of flexibility. You can specify different block model types. You can use pre-specified or free models and so on. There are several extensions available for analyzing multi-level and temporal networks. And there are some open issues, such as selecting the number of clusters. In some cases, especially if you have a large networks, these block modeling procedures are relatively slow. And combining different types of generalized block modeling, this is more advanced open issues. Now, if you want to use this block modeling, then you can use FIAC. I think that Daria will provide some introduction into FIAC, maybe not specifically block modeling, but at least you will see the program. Or you can use this block modeling R package, which was created by Aleš Žiberna. This is, again, the link to the short tutorial how to use this. And then Fabio, my coworker, he is also working on the graphical user interface that is based on the block modeling R package. And you can use this interface in several ways. Here they are written here. This is exactly what Fabio sent me. And you see there is a note from him to me, which I forgot to erase. But you can try this. And if you have some issues, you see that from this note that Fabio is a very kind person, and he will be able to help you or make you some suggestions, or you can write me and I can ask him, or I can help you by myself. Now I will, we have 15 minutes. I will very quickly show you how to use this, at least the basic functions from block modeling package. Now, if you don't have this block modeling package installed, please install it. It is available in CRAN. So you just type install.package block modeling, and that's it. And then you have to load the package. So if you are familiar with, if you're working mainly with PIAC, then you might have some data already prepared in PIAC format. This is okay because there is a function load network 2 that is a part of this block modeling package. And this function will allow you to read the PIAC format files. And there is one borrowing net file, and this is one network. I just read it with this function. You can see it's in a matrix form now. And you can visualize this given network by using the function plotmat, and you just provide this function with the data object, and here you have the network visualization. Now, these data were collected by Valentina Hlebets and her coworkers from 15 undergraduate students that were attending lectures of a course. And the students were asked, from whom would you like to borrow learning materials? And we want to apply block modeling on these data now. So to apply block modeling, we use this opt random parse function. And this function actually does the work for you. You have to provide the network in a matrix form. Then you have to select the number of clusters, which is 3. You have to select the approach. Here I said binary, but you can also set home for homogeneity. And then you have to select the allowed block types. Now the number of repetitions is should be as high as possible. I set to 100, which might be okay for such small networks, but if you want to publish your results somewhere, increase this value. I keep it small because otherwise it might have, take some time. So this rep tells the algorithm how many times to repeat the clustering procedure, so block modeling procedure, because we want to repeat this many times in order to avoid a local optimum. This anchors allows you to use all the computer cores, or if you say 0 here, then all but one course will be used. It's important to keep one core free so that your computer won't freeze. So if I run this, already run this, then I can use this plot function and keep this solution here, and I will get the plotted solution here, you will see that these complete blocks, the links in complete blocks are solid black, but the links in null blocks are not completely black. So this is how can you differentiate quite quickly between null and complete blocks. However, you can use also this plotmat function. Here you provide, as I said already, the matrix and then the partition. The partition can be assessed by using this cluster function, and you provide the result of block modeling in this cluster function. So this is an alternative way of visualization. You can also print out the image matrix by using im function. You can see that, yeah, as I said, 1, 2, 3 complete blocks and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 null blocks. You can also calculate the block densities by using fun by blocks function, or you can simply print the error. So the value of a criterion function, which is 28. If you do not know how many clusters you want to select, you can run the algorithm for different number of clusters and then plot the number of, so plot the value of a criterion function for different number of clusters. I did this with this for loop. And then I plotted the values. You can see an elbow here at 3, which means that 3 is a very optimal number of clusters for this example. I will use these 4 minutes to show you how to do valued block modeling, and then I will probably end. So the Baker data are already in this block modeling package available. So use data Baker function to obtain the data. And these are the citation network. The units here are different journals from social networks, from social work field. And to so these are the data. We can take a look at the distribution of tie values, quite asymmetric. We can take a look at basic descriptive statistics. You can see that the median is 16, and this is what I will take as an M value. So yeah, this is an M value. Again, I can use this optimized random partition. This C means that the function is written in C programming language, so it's work a little bit faster. So to use valued block modeling, I have to set approach parameter to val, and then I have to provide this pre-spec M value, which is 16 here. Since I assume I allow only null and complete blocks here. Let me run this. Then I can also plot this result. I am demonstrating here that with this plot mat function, you can also specify some further parameters, such as the title and the margins. And title lines means where to position the title. So here it is a little bit too low. So I will put it a little bit higher. So I set title line to 2. And I think that I have 2 minutes. I'm not interpreting the results, just want to show you how to use these functions for homogeneity block modeling. You see, it's very short. Another example from this kindergarten data, these are the data for homogeneity block modeling. Set approach to hom for homogeneity, define the functions for measuring variability, sum of squares, deviations are used here, and that's it. Plot the results. You can see quite homogeneous values within blocks, and as it should be. You can visualize the image matrix also. but if you want to apply this normalization, no, I will stop here before the normalizations. If you are interested in more, here I would talk about these normalizations for the case when the units have unequal relational capacities. This might not be the best example to show you, but at least the name of the function is given and how you can use this. And then you will have examples for sparse networks and also for pre-specified modeling, and also how to use this relative fit function. I will go back to my slides just so that this material is available here on this link. I might remove this from my web page in a couple of weeks or at some point of time. So if you are interested in this material, please download it now. Or if you will have any questions or anything, just let me write me an email, which you will also find here at lard.si. I think I have to finish now. Yeah.
Yes, we have Marjan, thank you. Thanks a lot. We have a couple of questions, so maybe clarification. We have that in the chat. I will just read them and probably summarize, because I believe that those questions, they relate generally to block modeling approach and generalized block modeling. So the first question is probably whether this approach can be used for cost effectiveness analysis, probably. So the question is, how can we judge on the cost effectiveness this method? Are there any simpler method, or maybe how efficient this method is? Well, at least how it is written. How can we judge on the cost effectiveness this method? Are there any simpler methods? And the second one is, are all of those different options of clustering and block models something that we would be using when analyzing surveys and data and representing them visually? Well, okay. I think you have shown some examples already, but maybe you just could elaborate a little bit.
I will start with the second question. Of course, this is the method that can be used when you have a survey and when you collect the whole network data. Yes, to simplify the network data and to visualize the results of this simplified, to visualize these simplified networks. Yes. So this examples that I was showing, many of them were collected with a survey, such as this learning in a knowledge flow networks. Now, regarding the simpler methods, I don't know if I can answer this. I'm not aware of any simpler methods that would be such effective, especially from the perspective of what we can specify within this generalized block modeling framework. Maybe Nusha could elaborate on this question further if she's here. Now the categorical data, yes, if we have ordinal data, sure, but there are some dilemmas still open. For example, here I use this, I had this ordinal data. Where was this? With this police recruits data, it was sparse. Oh, I cannot, here it is. No. yeah, this is actually no, I cannot find it. But I had this with where the social knowledge was measured from 1 to 5, but then we had to select the threshold. But you could also apply it if you can consider. Now, if you can consider that the differences between the answers are the same from all the answers, all pairs of answers, then you can, of course, use these approaches. But otherwise, if you have this ordinal data where this is not the case, then yeah, this is an open question. Then how to analyze such data appropriately. But yeah, it's very case. I mean, if you have such data like categorical data, it's also very. It depends on the substance. So what you want to analyze, and from there it should be judged whether these existing approaches can be used or not. If you have ordinal scale with 10 possible values, it might be okay. If you have only 3 values, maybe binarization would be possible, and so on. So it's very case specific. I cannot give you a general answer, but yeah, a lot is possible.
Okay. So, dear colleagues, do you have any other questions to Marjan?
By the way, if you're afraid to ask here, you can also write me an email and I will be glad to help you. So
yeah. Thank you so much, Marjan.
Thank you.
You can also write the questions to us and we can kind of compose them all together and then send them to our professors who will be teaching here at our summer school. Okay, so now I think we should have a break because it was a very nice
intensive
lecture. So Marjan, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to listen to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was great.